I have trouble convincing physicians. I have a physician friend, when I told him that there were hungry children, he said he didn't believe it, so I got him the fact sheet. It seems to me that in our affluent society, it's difficult for people to believe these kinds of facts. I also think there is a tendency in America for people to find it easier to give to Biafra or other foreign countries than it is to believe that right in your own backyard you have a problem of this nature. And perhaps it's that we don't, as Americans, like to admit this.
All you have to do is go behind closed doors and you'll see these things down in the poverty area, because, believe me, this is for real. And not just hunger, there's a cry for help, period. Like you might walk into a supermarket down there and you see some child sticking food underneath their clothes, and you want to just look at that. That's the way the parents are bringing the children up nowadays. But it wouldn't be so many problems of food being stolen or anything else. People would just look around and see that there is hunger.
I have seen it down in this area where people have been actually starving. But, you know, like you say, a lot of people say, well, I don't see the stomach sticking out, or the children, they don't look like they're starving to me. But they are. I have seen them, you know, actually children begging for food. You know, they come to your house and they ask you, Miss Khan, do you have anything for me to eat? You know, and you say, yeah, you know, or here's some money, you can go get yourself something to eat. Or a lot of times I have seen little children, I know the children, but not their mothers. And they'll come and say, my mother said, do you have $1 so she can get us something to eat?
And really, you have to just take one day at a time. Because I know it's been many a night I've laid in the bed and I said, well, how in the world can I get $1 or $2 together to go to the store to get something to eat for tomorrow morning? And I really don't know. And I'll say a little prayer, and I guess the next morning I wake up, somebody comes to the house, and it hurts my pride to a certain extent to say, do you have $1? And if they ask me what for, that's all I can say is because I want to buy something for breakfast.
We don't see children starving, showing all of the classical signs of kwashiorkor that you see of the Biafran children. But we do see children every day that are labeled as failure to thrive. They're children who are not growing properly because they are not getting the proper nourishment, or for some other reason that has to do with their not being able to utilize the food that they are getting. These are children at risk. They're not growing properly now. They're getting a poor start, one that is likely to follow them throughout life. These are potential candidates for our cycle of poverty.
These are some candidates for the cycle of poverty. The children of Baltimore's low-income population, who are suffering from an affliction that cannot be seen with the naked eye. That affliction, while allowing them to grow to adulthood without obvious physical impairment, will rob them of much of their ability to concentrate, to learn, resist disease. That affliction, along with many of poverty's problems, hides most of its presence below the surface like an iceberg. But it is there nonetheless. In Baltimore today, 1 out of every 6 children suffers from some nutritional defect, especially those of low-income areas where iron and protein-rich foods are too highly priced for limited budgets. These findings have been substantiated by 2 scientific studies now going on at Baltimore clinics. One of these day-in, day-out studies of urban health problems takes place at the University of Maryland's Community Pediatric Center in downtown Baltimore. The center was established in 1967 as a means of providing continuous health care for residents of a specified area. Nearly as important is the clinic's function as a mechanism for collecting data concerning the effects of malnutrition on the health, learning capability, and emotional stability of the urban poor. A slightly older facility is centered in the Johns Hopkins Hospital's Comprehensive Child Care Project 609. The area covered by the project near the East Baltimore Hospital includes some 15,000 residents, many from the lowest income brackets. Established in 1966, Project 609 provides medical and dental care for youth from birth to age 18. Both it and the University of Maryland's Community Pediatric Center have turned up evidence of dietary deficiencies among the poor.
We have not been struck by a high incidence of the rather dramatic results of, say, severe nutrition. For instance, we've not seen a large number of cases of vitamin deficiency, such as beriberi or scurvy or rickets, nor have we seen the severe cases of marasmus, starvation, kwashiorkor. But what has struck us as being most significant and most important has been more of a subtle problem in terms of total nutrition. And these are borne out in the figures that we have concerning our weight and height measurements, the development of results of hemoglobin and hematocrit determinations for the determination of anemia within the population.
In our work with the children of the inner city of Baltimore and the western side, it's become evident to us in the last year that 1 in 6 of the children who are entering school in this area are entering school with documentable signs of malnutrition. And then on testing these children psychologically who have these documentable signs of malnutrition, there is no question of the fact that their intellectual capability to perform well in school is seriously impaired.
CPC opened its doors a little over 2 years ago. We've had a chance to see a large number of youngsters from 1 month of age on through their 18th birthday. If anyone had told me when I took the job about 2 years ago that I would see as much evidence in blood levels of vitamins and minerals, of malnutrition as I see here, I'd have told them they were crazy. In fact, I almost did for my boss when he told me some of the things that he wanted us to look at. But we have seen youngsters here with hemoglobin levels of 4 and 5, very dangerous levels. We see youngsters with blood levels of vitamin A and carotene and tocopherol that are down below the levels that are set as deficient in impoverished countries of the world, where you certainly would expect levels of that kind. We've seen youngsters who are obese, not because they overeat, but because they're eating the wrong things. They're eating diets they're filling up on bread, for example, and on cereals. And they get far too few green vegetables, raw fruits and vegetables, and lean meats. The reason for this? Mainly, I guess, lack of money. Where mother can't afford the foods that she knows very frequently that they should have, she buys those foods that she's going to get the most mileage out of, that she's going to be able to fill, even though, although she's not aware of it, she can't really nourish her family.
Each year in the city of Baltimore, 700 children damaged from malnutrition enter school, so damaged by this that it is very unlikely that they will make it to independence. And the difference between dependence and independence is a repetition of a poverty cycle, a failure to enter the mainstream of society. And each one of these individuals so damaged, in the end, will produce a $1 million swing between what he might have done and what he has done.
Fortunately, the problem of hidden hunger and its effects has not gone unnoticed by all but those studying and caring for the urban poor. A recent White House conference focused attention on the plight of the nation's malnourished population. But Baltimore, with its heavy population of urban poor, already had been alerted to its own problem as early as September 1968. At that time, Dr. Matthew Tabak, then Deputy Commissioner of Health, expressed official concern in a letter to the mayor.
Late in 1968, when I was the Deputy Commissioner of Health in the city of Baltimore, I became convinced that a serious problem of malnutrition existed among large numbers of people within the city. As a result of this observation, I wrote a report for the attention of the mayor indicating that serious attention had to be given to this problem as a major public health problem. These observations were based upon findings among infants, among preschool-age children, among school-age children, and among pregnant mothers. Among infants, we were finding extraordinary levels of iron deficiency anemia. Among preschool-age children and among school-age children, we were finding definite evidence of poor development, both emotionally and physically, directly attributable to poor nutrition. Among mothers living in poor economic circumstances, we were finding extraordinary levels of premature birth, which we attributed to poor nutrition. All of these observations led to the conclusion that immediate action was necessary.
Let me understand. You say the House is, you say Congress is chopping up the bill. I thought the bill was approved and signed.
Following Dr. Tabak's assertion that immediate action was necessary to deal with the problem of Baltimore's malnourished children, an organization known as the Mayor's Task Force on Nutrition was formed in early 1969, with Dr. Tabak as its first chairman. The task force's purpose was to work with other government agencies and volunteer groups, such as the League of Women Voters, in order to determine how existing food programs could be strengthened or streamlined.
Indicating what he's going to do with his increased funds. We go from $340 million appropriation to $600.
One of the first activities of the mayor's task force was to work for the expansion of feeding in Baltimore's school system, so that needy children could receive at least one well-balanced meal a day. Through task force action, the City Council increased its budget appropriations for school lunches from $100,000 to $553,000. And the number of lunches served jumped dramatically in 1 year from about 2,000 per day to more than 30,000. Despite these gains, however, there are currently 12,000 children in Title I area schools. Children of families with the lowest incomes who receive neither free milk nor lunch. In order to finance an adequate service for the needy, it is estimated that $2.5 million is needed. Last year, the state of Maryland turned down a request for this money, but this year Governor Mandel promised $1.2 million for the program. During the interim between the refusal and Governor Mandel's action, a volunteer group known as the Maryland Food Committee was formed in order to raise money from private sources. So far, it has collected more than $60,000 on a freelance basis. Another freelance organization of sorts, which has undertaken the job of feeding children, is the Lafayette Community Center, a community chest agency whose primary function is that of a settlement house. In 1969, Lafayette Square added another service to its heavy schedule of responsibilities by inaugurating a program of free lunch and breakfast for several hundred children of the area. Vernon Sheffey, executive director of the center and a lifelong resident of the neighborhood, explains why.
It was hard for me to understand it at first, that believe that in a city this size, that you could have the amount of hunger that you have without people actually showing physical signs of starvation, as you would find in India or one of the deprived countries. Hunger as such is I believe, the basis for a lot of the other problems that we have. person who's hungry is actually unable to function as a producing citizen. A child who has not received proper nutrition by the age of 12, if we believe what the medical experts say, has irreversible damage. Therefore, how can he relate positively to the things that happen to him in an area such as this, and the constant pressures of being a have-not, or respond to the positive things that you're asking of him? But hunger is much more than just lack of food. It's actually, you can have a meal of grits and fatback or what have you, and still be starving because your body is not receiving the nutrition that it should have. And we know that the statistics show that 52% of the people in the inner cities in Baltimore have sickle cell anemia, which is a direct result of malnutrition. As I understand it, it's where the red corpuscles, instead of developing as a circle, which if you look at it under a microscope, it takes a half-moon shape, and this is where it gets its name, of course, sickle cell anemia, which means that the body that cannot fight off disease and illness and this type of thing adequately.
The program of free meals at Lafayette Square Community Center is not designed to compete with, but to supplement the national lunch program now going on in many of the city's schools. And although it may be too early to draw precise and statistically accurate conclusions as to the value of the feeding programs, at least one elementary school principal, Mrs. Rosalind Lee of school number 111, feels the added nourishment has made a difference in many youngsters' performances.
In the past 2 years, since my coming to school 111, we have noted a marked improvement in the performance of some of our children who have had the advantage of participating in 2 important nutritional programs. One is carried out at the Lafayette Center, the other here at the school. We serve 216 lunches, beginning at 11:30 at our building. And at the same time, an eager group of children leave here and rush to the Lafayette Center, where they are served a hot lunch. Some of these same children also receive breakfast in the morning between 7:30 and 8:30. It was our experience that some of these children were coming to school without having had a good breakfast and were leaving here at 11:30 and were not receiving an adequate lunch. We were therefore very pleased to learn that these 2 programs would be in operation in this community. We found that the parents were very pleased about this new setup. We left to them the choice as to whether the child would eat here at the school or at the center. In the faces of many of these children who have been participating in the Lafayette Center, we see a new expression. We see an alertness on the part of many of these youngsters, an increase in their ability to carry out their responsibilities in school. We see happiness on the faces of many of the children. Some youngsters who came to us earlier to complain about the fact that they weren't feeling well are now not visiting us for that same reason, but for the purpose of showing us work that they have accomplished. And this, to us, says that the programs are working very well.
Another aspect of the problem of hidden hunger in which the task force is interested is the pricing of food in ghetto areas. In the past, it has been charged that ghetto prices are often higher than prices for identical items in white suburban neighborhoods. The task force, which often works with small neighborhood organizations, such as the East Baltimore Improvement Association, has even pointed out that the poor could save money if they had the mobility to travel to suburban stores and the financial ability to purchase food in bulk. And even routine checks of comparative prices show that despite the income gap between the average and poor American, those purchasing food in low-income neighborhood stores turn up few bargains.
And I'm not comparing the right sizes.
Occasionally, the mayor's task force on nutrition, in its periodic investigation of pricing patterns throughout the city, may even manage to bring together representatives of both the chain stores and economically deprived. When this happens, it is more often heat than light that is generated.
That's so. If we are putting pressure on the people who use the food stamps because they're not because of poor, because of the position that they are in, that we're going to take away deliveries. This is a lie. We never make a remark like that. We will never make a remark like that. We've been delivering for 20 years and we don't tend to quit deliveries. Now.
And did you or did you not say you couldn't help whether or not we were stupid purchasers, and did not buy when you ran your sales?
Stupid purchasers?
Yes, sir.
I don't recall saying that, but if I did say that, if a person doesn't shop what a man is offering to them, if I offer you something for 95 cents, which is steak this week, and you don't take it, that isn't my fault.
Okay, and did you or did you not tell me that if the contention between the purchasers in your store comparing prices weren't to, to limit itself and slow down and some of the pressure come off, that in order for you to drop your prices, what I'm saying, that you would have to take away the free delivery, which is the mainstay of the old people in O'Donnell Heights?
We would have to if we have to go into a discount operation. Every store in the city is doing that today. Okay. Every store. In other words, the more you offer in low prices, the more you have to take away from the people. You do not get anything from nothing. This is business sense.
Well, it's business sense to me when a community has a $2 million buying power and you're the only store that those people can use except for a very small minority, that you couldn't afford to at least put the sales when the checks are coming in, because most of those women buy by the month. They cannot live by the week. And most of those old people, they get $54 a month from Social Security, buy by the month.
Yes,
well,
this is true.
Let me interrupt over here.
Another aspect of the war on hidden hunger revolves about the National Food Stamp Program, which was designed as a means of increasing the poor's purchasing power. Today, food stamps may be purchased at some 40 banks selected because of their proximity to areas of poverty and food markets. This liberalization of the old rules may be a boon of convenience to the elderly, but no economic boon for the taxpayer. Each transaction will carry a charge of 50 cents for the bank in order to defray the cost of handling the stamps. Previously, both application for participation in the stamp program and acquisition of the stamps had to be made at a single headquarters at one of 4 locations throughout the city. Other difficulties in the program turned up besides this matter of convenience. Often the poor did not have the money to spend on the stamps. Participation in the program required the applicant to make 1 or 2 large cash payments per month in order to receive the stamps. Thus, what was designed to increase purchasing power, in fact, required a family to radically readjust and reapportion its budget to accommodate the schedule of payments. As a result, in 1968, only about 24% of those eligible for food stamps in Baltimore actually purchased them. Despite these difficulties, as well as a widespread lack of public understanding, interest in waging a war against hunger and malnutrition in the United States has been building steadily. In December 1969, the Johns Hopkins School of Hygiene and Public Health, an institution that often concerns itself with poverty overseas, was the scene for an address by Dr. Arnold Schaefer, chief of the United States Public Health Service's nutrition program. The subject of Dr. Schaefer's address, however, was not hunger overseas, but malnutrition in the United States and the consequences failure to conquer it will bring to all Americans.
Well, the obligation to make certain that our population is well fed, to me, has numerous basic reasons. One, in a land of agricultural surpluses that can be matched by no other country in the world, that has the largest food processing and distribution industry in the world, that has and claims the best education, the best health facilities, I find it inconceivable to me that we could justify not properly feeding, adequately feeding every single individual in the United States, especially since we export millions and billions of pounds of food each year. And perhaps most important, of course, is the moral obligation that every individual born in this United States, a free individual, should have the opportunity of developing into a productive, happy individual. Perhaps even more important is, on a worldwide basis, we've had the experience of seeing that when people are hungry, in the general classification, insufficient food, this is the real seed for social unrest and riot. And I'm not sure that some of this hasn't already played its role in the United States.
In the past, hunger has been described as an affliction that creates animals of people, that clutches at their bellies and shrivels their minds, that triggers a review of health and education programs too late to remedy. And we pass them on to the next generation. Today in Baltimore, there is no starvation of the kind seen in India or Biafra. But this does not necessarily make the above description of hunger less valid for the hidden hunger. Because it robs the poor of their opportunity to rise without impairing them physically, the effects of malnutrition may be even more insidious than actual starvation with its sympathy-provoking deformities. In the past, such starvation has not been ignored, but whether the more fortunate segments of the population can rise to the challenge of attacking their neighbor's unseen enemy remains an unanswered question.
This is a Channel 2 editorial. Human hunger can take several forms. We first think of hunger as starvation, caused by the absence of food of any kind. And we're told by those in a position to know that this type of hunger is rare in Baltimore. There is a second, less visible but equally distressing hunger that is present in Baltimore, one which offers a clear danger to a substantial segment of our population, especially the young. There are many names for this hidden hunger, including anemia, iron deficiency, or more simply, malnutrition. This usually occurs for two reasons. First, a lack of sufficient dietary knowledge, but more usually because poor people, trying desperately to make their meager means stretch as far as possible, buy food that is cheap and filling, but which lacks the vitamins and minerals and proteins their bodies need for healthy tissue and orderly functions. Physicians studying the problem describe children underprivileged in this respect as suffering from failure to thrive. This means their weights are under normal, they suffer repeatedly from colds and influenza and pneumonia, and are often severely anemic, not because of a lack of food, but because of lack of proper food. In most cases, they find these children improve in condition and perform better in schools where they get good nutritional foods once or twice a day. Their attention span in class becomes longer, and as Mr. Sheffy pointed out, they are better able to cope with the pressures of being a have-not. It has become today's cliche to wonder why a nation which can place walkers on the moon cannot feed its own poor. We, too, wonder. For example, we believe free school lunches for needy children to be a proven benefit which should be continued and expanded. We believe surplus foods bought with taxpayers' funds to support farm income could be used to greater advantage among the have-nots of our nation, and that new ways should be sought to accelerate delivery to those in need, ways that do not confuse and demean the recipient. The vitality of this nation should be the concern of all its citizens, for in the past, nations have not survived indefinitely when they have ignored their underprivileged. Someone has estimated that the eventual difference to the nation's wealth between a human life spent as a public burden and a life spent as a productive citizen is perhaps $1 million. So the pennies spent on school lunches may be the best investment we could make, except perhaps for the efforts to inform and educate a new generation in which there are no have-nots, a generation which will know how to avoid for themselves and their children all future hidden hunger. This has been a Channel 2 editorial.